My name is Ibrahim Al Rahman. I was born into a life most people could never imagine, a life surrounded by marble floors that reflected gold chandeliers and servants who never looked directly into my eyes. I was taught from the beginning that my bloodline carried honor, and that honor came with responsibility. My father was a prince, but more than that, he was a defender of Islam, a man whose faith was as rigid as the desert sun. From the moment I could speak, I was taught that Allah was always watching me, recording every action, every thought, every weakness. There was no separation between religion and identity. Islam was not just what we believed, it was who we were. Every morning before sunrise, I heard the call to prayer echo across Riyadh, its sound both beautiful and terrifying. Beautiful because it reminded me of order. Terrifying because it reminded me that my life belonged to something I did not fully understand. As a child, I memorized the Quran, not because I wanted to, but because it was expected. I remember sitting cross-legged on cold floors while my teacher corrected every mispronounced word, his voice sharp, his eyes unforgiving. When I recited perfectly, he nodded. When I failed, he frowned. Approval always felt conditional. Love always felt distant. People looked at me and saw privilege. They saw wealth, influence, and certainty. But inside, I felt something I could never admit. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from danger, but the kind that lives quietly in your chest and never leaves. I feared disappointing my father. I feared dishonoring my family, but most of all, I feared Allah. I feared that no matter how perfectly I obeyed, it would never be enough. At night, when the palace grew silent and the city lights flickered beyond my window, I would lie awake staring into darkness, wondering if Allah knew me, not as a prince, not as a symbol, but as a person. I whispered prayers not out of love, but out of obligation. My lips moved, but my heart remained silent. There was an emptiness inside me that wealth could not fill, and discipline could not erase. I remember standing beside my father during public prayers, cameras watching us, religious leaders praising our devotion. They called me the future of faith, a man chosen to preserve truth. But they did not see the questions buried beneath my obedience. They did not hear the quiet voice inside me asking why faith felt like fear instead of peace. I never spoke those questions aloud. In my world, questions were dangerous. Doubt was weakness. Curiosity was betrayal. So I buried everything beneath routine. I became the son they expected, the man they demanded, the believer they celebrated. But no matter how perfectly I performed, the emptiness remained. It followed me through every prayer, every ceremony, every moment of forced certainty. I felt like an actor trapped inside a role I could never escape. I did not know then that my life was already moving towards something I could not control. I did not know that everything I believed, everything I trusted, everything I was taught to fear, would soon collapse in a single moment. And I did not know that the night my heart stopped beating would become the moment my soul finally began to live. The first crack in my faith did not come through rebellion. It came through loss. His name was Hassan, and he was the only person in my life who ever spoke to me like I was human instead of a symbol. He had grown up near the palace because his father worked in religious administration, and over the years, he became someone I trusted in ways I trusted no one else. Hassan was intelligent, observant, and careful with his words, but there was something different about him. He did not just repeat what he was taught, he thought. One night, we sat together on the palace rooftop, the warm desert air surrounding us, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the horizon. He spoke quietly, almost as if afraid the wind itself might betray him. He asked me if I had ever truly felt close to Allah. Not through prayer, not through memorization, but personally. His question unsettled me. I gave him the only answer I knew. As the answer I had been trained to give, I told him closeness came through obedience. He looked at me not with judgment but with sadness. He said obedience without love felt like slavery, not faith. I remember feeling panic rise inside me. I warned him never to say such things again, but he did not argue. He only nodded and stared into the distance. A few weeks later, Hassan disappeared. No announcement was made, no explanation was given. In our world, silence was often the only explanation needed. I asked my father where he had gone, and he responded with cold simplicity. He said Hassan had lost his way and faced the consequences of dishonoring religious truth. He told me this was what happened to those who allowed doubt to corrupt their loyalty. His voice carried no emotion, only certainty. But that night I could not sleep. Hassan's words echoed in my mind. Obedience without love felt like slavery. I tried to silence the thought by reciting verses I had memorized since childhood, but they no longer brought comfort. They felt like walls closing in around me. Days later, I overheard two officials speaking in low voices. They confirmed what I already feared. Hassan had been executed quietly, without public record, without ceremony. His existence erased as if he had never lived. My chest tightened in a way I could not explain. It was not just grief, it was realization. If faith was truth, why did it fear questions? Why did it require silence to survive? That night, alone in my room, I stared at my phone for a long time. My hands trembled as I opened a private browser window. I hesitated, knowing that even the act of searching could destroy me. But something inside me had already begun to break free from fear. I typed slowly, my heart racing with every letter. I searched for testimonies of people who had questioned Islam. I expected anger, lies, or madness. Instead, I found something unexpected. I found peace in their words. They spoke of knowing God personally, not through obligation, but through relationship. I did not understand it, and yet something inside me responded. I closed the phone quickly, overwhelmed by both fear and curiosity. I whispered prayers for forgiveness, asking Allah to cleanse my thoughts. But deep inside, I knew something had changed. Hassan's death had planted a seed I could not remove. For the first time in my life, obedience no longer felt like certainty. It felt like a prison, and somewhere beyond the walls of everything I had ever known, pure truth was waiting for me, whether I was ready to face it or not. After Hassan died, the palace no longer felt like a home. It felt like a warning. Every hallway carried memories of conversations that could never happen again. Every familiar face reminded me how easily a life could disappear without explanation. I tried to force myself back into routine. I prayed when I was expected to pray. I recited when I was expected to recite. I played the role I had been trained to perform since childhood. But something inside me had awakened, and no amount of discipline could silence it. The questions followed me everywhere. They whispered in my mind when I stood in prayer. They lingered when I heard religious leaders speak about certainty with absolute confidence. I wondered how they could sound so sure when I felt so empty. At night, when the palace grew quiet and the world outside slowed into silence, I returned to the only place where my questions could exist without judgment. My phone became both my greatest fear and my only source of truth. I began searching more carefully, using hidden applications, deleting every trace afterward. Each search felt like walking on the edge of a cliff. One mistake could destroy everything. One night, while browsing through anonymous discussions, I found a message from someone who claimed to have once lived a life similar to mine. He wrote about discovering the Injil, the Gospel, and how it changed him forever. At the bottom of his message was a link. My finger hovered over it for a long time. I knew clicking it could expose me. I knew it could be monitored, but curiosity was stronger than fear. I pressed it. It led to a simple application, a Bible. My breathing became shallow as I downloaded it, hiding it inside a folder no one would think to open. For several minutes I stared at the screen, unsure where to begin. This book had been described to me all my life as corrupted, dangerous, forbidden, and yet it was right there in my hands. I opened it randomly, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might echo through the walls. My eyes fell on words that would change me forever. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I froze. Rest. That word alone shattered something inside me. My entire life had been built on fear and performance. Rest was not something I understood. I read the words again, slowly, carefully, as if they might disappear. Come to me. Not submit from a distance. Not obey without understanding. Come to me. It felt personal. It felt alive. I did not know why, but tears began to fill my eyes. I quickly wiped them away, afraid even in solitude. That night, I could not stop reading. Every word felt different from anything I had known. This was not the voice of a distant master. This was the voice of someone who saw pain and responded with compassion. Someone who invited instead of demanded. Someone who loved instead of threatened. For the first time in my life I felt seen, but with that feeling came terror. If anyone discovered what I was doing, the consequences would be severe. I closed the app and hid the phone beneath my pillow, my hands trembling. Sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, I found myself standing in a vast desert, alone under a dark sky. In the distance I saw a figure standing in light. I could not see his face, but I felt his presence. He did not speak with sound, yet somehow I heard him clearly. He called my name. Ibrahim. I woke up suddenly, my heart racing, my body covered in sweat. The room was silent, but I was not the same. Something had found me, something I could not explain, and deep inside I knew my life was already beginning to change. The day my heart stopped was not dramatic at first. It began like any other carefully controlled evening inside the palace. Religious leaders gathered in the main hall, their white thobes immaculate, their voices smooth and confident as they discussed faith, obedience, and national honor. I stood beside my father, smiling when expected, nodding when addressed. My body was present, but my mind was somewhere else. Ever since the dream and the words I had read in secret, something inside me felt divided. I was living two lives in one body. As the gathering continued, a strange tightness formed in my chest. At first I ignored it. Weakness was unacceptable in my world. I straightened my posture and forced a calm expression. But the pressure grew stronger, spreading into my arm, climbing into my throat. The room began to blur around the edges. Voices sounded distant, as if they were underwater. I tried to take a deep breath, but the air felt thin and sharp. I excused myself quietly, not wanting to cause a scene, and stepped into a long marble corridor away from the crowd. The silence there was overwhelming. I placed my hand against the cold wall, trying to steady myself. My heartbeat became irregular, pounding violently, then skipping in terrifying pauses. Panic rose inside me. I whispered a prayer under my breath, asking Allah for mercy, for protection, for forgiveness, for doubts I had not confessed. The pain intensified without warning. My knees weakened. The world tilted. I remember the exact sound my body made when it hit the floor, a hollow echo against polished stone, then darkness swallowed everything. But the darkness was not empty. It felt thick, heavy, like falling through endless space. I expected nothingness. Instead, I felt awareness. I was no longer inside my body. I was above it. I saw my own form lying motionless on the floor, servants rushing toward me, security shouting for doctors. I saw my father drop to his knees beside me, his face filled with shock I had never seen before. His authority vanished in that moment, replaced by helplessness. I watched as medical staff pressed on my chest. Were you calling my name? Injecting medications? I should have felt fear. I should have felt panic. But I felt strangely calm. It was as if the fear that defined my life had been stripped away the moment my heart stopped. Then I felt myself being pulled upward, away from the palace, away from the noise, away from the identity I had carried my entire life. The darkness began to thin, replaced by a light that did not blind me but embraced me. It was not harsh, it was pure. As I moved toward it, memories flashed before me with painful clarity. Every prayer spoken without love, every moment of pride disguised as righteousness, every time I ignored injustice because it benefited my status. Nothing was hidden, yet I did not feel condemned. I felt exposed. The titles that once defined me faded. Prince, son, heir, Muslim. They peeled away one by one until nothing remained except me. I realized I had never truly known who I was without those labels. The light grew stronger, and with it came a peace I had never experienced on earth. It did not demand anything from me. It simply existed steady and unshaken. I understood in that moment that I was crossing into something beyond religion, beyond culture, beyond everything I had been taught to fear, and as I moved fully into that overwhelming presence, I sensed that I was about to encounter the truth my soul had been searching for my entire life. I stood in a place that had no walls, no ceiling, no horizon, yet it felt more real than anything I had ever touched on earth. The light surrounded me, not blinding but alive, as if it carried awareness within it. It did not press against me with force, it welcomed me. For the first time in my existence I felt completely known. Not known as a prince, not known as a son trying to please his father, known as I truly was, without disguise, without performance. Every hidden fear, every secret doubt, every silent cry I had buried beneath obedience was visible there, and yet I was not rejected, I was not destroyed, I was seen. Then he appeared. He did not emerge suddenly like lightning. He was simply there, as if he had always been there waiting for me. Jesus Christ stood before me. His presence was unlike anything human language could contain. He was not weak, and he was not fragile. He carried authority that made power on earth look meaningless, yet his presence did not threaten me. It comforted me. His eyes held a depth that pierced through every layer of my identity. I felt my knees weaken, and I fell. Not because I was forced to, but because something inside me recognized truth. He spoke my name, Ibrahim. The sound of it carried both strength and gentleness. He did not accuse me. He did not remind me of my failures. Instead, he showed me my life, not in fragments, but in fullness. I saw myself as a child, afraid of disappointing a distant God. I saw myself memorizing words without understanding their meaning. I saw myself standing beside my father, pretending certainty while emptiness consumed me. I saw Hassan, his voice trembling as he spoke truths he knew could cost his life. I felt his fear. I felt his loneliness. I felt his courage. Tears filled my eyes as I realized how blind I had been. Then he showed me something deeper. I saw people from every nation, every tribe, every skin color. Was black men and women whose dignity had been crushed by systems of pride, Asian families who had suffered in silence, Arabs who believed their lineage made them superior, Europeans, Africans, people from places I had never seen. They stood together, equal in his presence. No hierarchy, no superiority, no division. I saw moments from my own life where pride had lived inside me without my awareness. Moments where I had believed without words that my status made me more valuable. Shame flooded my soul. The truth was undeniable. The divisions we created on earth did not exist in his eyes. His love was not limited by race, language, or bloodline. His sacrifice had been for all. I saw his suffering. I saw the cross, not as a symbol taught in foreign stories, but as reality. I felt the weight of what he endured, not as weakness, but as love chosen freely, love stronger than death, love that did not demand perfection before offering itself. I could not stop crying. My voice trembled as I asked the only question that mattered. "Why are you showing me this?" He answered without hesitation, "Because you asked for truth." His voice carried no anger, only certainty. In that moment I understood that everything I had been taught about worth, identity, and closeness to God had been incomplete. Relationship had replaced fear, love had replaced obligation. He then showed me my body lying lifeless in the palace, doctors still fighting to revive me, my father watching, helpless and afraid. Jesus looked at me again, his eyes steady. "You may return," he said, "but you cannot return the same." I understood immediately. To accept truth meant losing everything I had known, my status, my family, my protection. Fear tried to rise again, but his presence silenced it. "Will you leave me?" I asked. His answer was immediate. "Never." The light intensified around him, and peace filled every part of me. I realized death had not been my end, it had been my introduction to truth, and I knew that if I returned, my life would never belong to fear again. Sound returned before breath did. It came as distant noise, muffled and distorted, like voices trying to reach me through deep water. Then pain exploded into my chest, sharp and violent, forcing air into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. My body jerked upward as if pulled by invisible hands. I gasped, choking on life itself. My eyes opened to blinding white lights above me. Faces hovered around me, their expressions frozen between disbelief and fear. Someone shouted in Arabic. I'd saying my heart was beating again. Another voice called it a miracle. My chest burned with every breath, but the pain was nothing compared to the overwhelming awareness filling my mind. I was back. The memory of him had not faded. It had not dissolved like a dream. It remained clear, alive, undeniable. Jesus was real. I lay there in silence as machines monitored every fragile beat of my heart. My father stood near the foot of the bed, his face pale, his authority replaced by something I had never seen before. Vulnerability. When our eyes met, he forced strength back into his expression, as if weakness itself was forbidden. He said Allah had spared me for a reason. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to tell him who had actually saved me. But fear held my voice hostage. I nodded weakly, pretending agreement. While inside everything had changed. The days that followed felt unreal. Doctors explained how close I had come to death, how my heart had stopped completely. They could not explain why it started again. They called it rare. They called it unexplainable. But I knew exactly why I was alive. I had been given a choice. And I had returned. When I was finally alone, I placed my hand over my chest and felt the steady rhythm beneath my fingers. Each beat reminded me of him. Each breath felt like a gift I had not earned. I wanted to pray, but I did not know how anymore. The words I had memorized since childhood felt empty now. Instead, I spoke honestly, quietly, unsure if I was even worthy to speak. I said his name, Jesus. The room felt still, but not empty. Peace settled over me in a way I had never experienced before. As it did not come from ritual, it came from presence. After leaving the hospital, I returned to the palace, but it no longer felt like home. The walls that once symbolized security now felt like barriers designed to contain truth. I resumed my routine to avoid suspicion, but inside I was no longer the same person. Every prayer performed in public felt like a lie. Every religious conversation felt distant, disconnected from the reality I had witnessed. At night, I returned to the hidden Bible on my phone. I read slowly, absorbing every word. One verse gripped me completely. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Freedom was something I had never truly understood until now. But freedom came with a cost. I became aware of my father watching me more closely. He studied my behavior, my expressions, my silence. And he sensed the change even without understanding it. One evening he asked me directly if I was hiding something. His voice was calm, but his eyes searched for weakness. I forced a smile and denied everything. It was the first time I had ever lied to him. Guilt and necessity collided inside me. I hated the deception, but I feared the consequences of truth. The palace had become a place where my body lived, but my soul did not belong. I knew the path ahead would demand everything from me, but the fear that once controlled me no longer had power, because I had seen him, and I knew I was no longer alone. The moment my secret was exposed did not come with shouting or violence. It came with silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the air itself had turned solid. I was summoned to my father's private chamber late in the evening. It was a place reserved for matters of authority and judgment. The door closed behind me with a quiet finality that made my chest tighten. My father sat across from me, his posture perfect, his face calm, but his eyes carried something colder than anger. Beside him sat Sheikh Abdullah, our family's most trusted religious advisor, a man whose words carried the weight of law inside our household. Neither of them spoke at first. The silence stretched, forcing me to confront the truth I had tried so carefully to hide. Finally, my father reached forward and placed my phone on the table between us. My heart stopped. The screen was on. The Bible app was open. I felt the blood drain from my face. He did not need to ask. The evidence was already there. Sheikh Abdullah leaned forward, his voice quiet but sharp. He asked me how long I had been betraying Allah. The word betraying cut deeper than any blade. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My father's gaze never left mine. He asked if the rumors were true, if I had allowed foreign lies to poison my faith. His voice remained calm, but beneath it I felt disappointment, fear, and something else. Shame? I tried to explain, but the words felt fragile compared to the weight of their certainty. I told them I had seen something. I told them I had experienced truth. Sheikh Abdullah's expression hardened. He said what I experienced was deception, a test from Allah meant to measure my loyalty. He said doubt was the whisper of Shaitan, and that repentance was my only path to redemption. My father then spoke words I will never forget. He said I had one chance to restore my honor. I had one chance to reject what I had seen and return to Islam fully, or I would lose everything: my name, my inheritance, my place in the family, my protection. The weight of his words crushed me. Everything I had ever known stood on one side, and truth stood on the other. Fear surged inside me, demanding surrender. It reminded me of Hassan. It reminded me of what happened to those who chose differently. My voice trembled as I asked for time to think. My father agreed, but his eyes made it clear his patience was limited. That night, alone in my room, I collapsed onto the floor. The palace felt suffocating, its walls no longer protecting me but closing in around me. I thought about my childhood, my family, the life I would lose, the safety I would never have again. I felt completely alone. Tears fell freely. It was something I had not allowed myself to do since I was a boy. My mind screamed at me to survive, to say the words they wanted to hear, to return to the life that guaranteed protection. But beneath the fear, another voice remained steady. I remembered his eyes. I remembered his words. Never. He had promised he would never leave me. That promise now stood between me and the life I was expected to reclaim. My entire existence came down to one decision: truth or safety, Jesus or everything else. I realized in that moment that following him was not about comfort. It was about surrender. I fell to my knees, my body shaking, my voice barely able to form words. I told him I was afraid. I told him I did not know if I was strong enough, but I also told him I could not deny what he had shown me. Peace filled the room again, quiet but undeniable. And for the first time in my life I understood that faith was not obedience forced by fear. It was trust chosen in the presence of uncertainty. By morning I knew what I had to do. I woke to the dawn with a weight on my chest heavier than any I had known, but it was not fear this time. It was resolve. The palace corridors were quiet, the servants moving with practiced silence, unaware that today everything would change. I dressed carefully, not out of vanity, but to face my family with the courage I had been gathering in secret for weeks. My father awaited me in the same chamber as before, his posture immaculate, his face unreadable. I felt the old instinct to bend, to perform, to claim obedience. But it failed me. This time I was no longer playing a role. I stepped inside and met his eyes. The title of prince, the inheritance, the years of expectation, all irrelevant now. I began to speak, my voice shaking but growing steadier with every word. I told him I could no longer live under the rules that demanded fear instead of love, that obedience without truth had been my prison. I said I had seen Jesus, not as rebellion, but as reality. His face remained impassive, yet I felt the walls of authority tremble. I told him I would no longer claim the faith that had bound me in silence and terror. I renounced Islam, not in anger, not in spite, but because my soul could not live without the truths I had encountered. The moment I finished speaking, I understood the cost. The reaction was not dramatic at first, it was worse. It was absolute. My father's expression remained calm, but his eyes carried the weight of death. He declared me spiritually dead, would erase my name from family registers, and stripped me of all titles. My identity as a prince, as a son, as a member of our lineage, was gone. My inheritance vanished. My protection, the safety of bloodlines, all of it had been withdrawn in silence, as though I had never existed. Isolation struck immediately. Servants who once nodded respectfully avoided my gaze. Family members whispered in corners, afraid to approach, afraid to question, afraid of my new status as someone erased. I walked the halls and felt invisible, yet painfully aware of every glance. The palace had become a tomb, a place where I existed but no longer belonged. And yet within me, something extraordinary began to bloom. Freedom. The kind I had never known, not even in secret prayer, not even in dreams. For the first time, my decisions belonged entirely to me. Fear no longer dictated my every thought, obedience no longer caged my soul. I felt a strange exhilaration, but the battle had only begun. Doubt crept into quiet corners of my mind. Loneliness clawed at me. Trauma whispered that I had made a mistake, that survival demanded retreat. Memories of Hassan, of my childhood, of every warning flashed relentlessly. I collapsed to my knees that evening, overwhelmed by the silence of my former life and the new reality I had embraced. I prayed, not the formal prayers I had memorized, but a raw plea from the depths of my being. I asked him to guide me, to strengthen me, to remind me why he had spared my life. I felt his presence almost immediately, a gentle warmth that filled the emptiness inside me. His assurance was simple. I brought you back for this moment, Ibrahim. You are not alone. You are seen. No, you are loved. The weight of all I had lost felt lighter in that presence. I understood then that true freedom came not from titles, inheritance, or protection, but from surrender. To follow him meant I could walk without fear, even if the world itself opposed me. Even if I had nothing left, I carried something greater, truth, and I knew that no amount of isolation or rejection could take that from me. Today my name may be forgotten in my family's history, but in his eyes I am remembered, in his eyes I belong, and that knowledge carried me through the nights, through the whispers, through the loneliness, and prepared me for the challenges yet to come. Months passed in a strange, silent tension. The palace felt like a cage, and every corner reminded me of everything I had lost. My father never spoke to me directly about faith again, but his presence was heavier than ever. He expected obedience, yet he could sense it would never return. One evening he summoned me to the family council, a room filled with elders and advisors, the same place where my father had once shaped my life with authority. I walked in without fear this time, though my heart pounded with every step. The room was thick with expectation. My father's voice broke the silence first, calm but piercing. He demanded that I renounce what I had done, that I return to Islam to restore the honor of our family. He spoke of shame, of public perception, of lineage and duty. I listened carefully, seeing not the prince I had been, but the man who had lived his entire life under fear. I saw the cracks in his authority, the quiet terror that lived beneath the facade of power. When it was my turn to speak, I did not hesitate. I did not speak with anger. I did not speak with pride. I spoke with truth. I told him that I had seen Jesus, that he was real, that his love had touched me, that I could not go back to living under fear. I told him that obedience without truth was death, and I could no longer live a lie. The room was silent. His face betrayed nothing, but his eyes searched mine for weakness. He asked again if I would recant. I shook my head, calm and resolute. That moment stretched, a quiet eternity. I realized that he feared not losing me, but losing face. He feared shame more than separation, and I understood that for the first time. I spoke again, my voice steady, telling him that I would walk away, that I accepted the consequences, that I was no longer bound to fear, title, or inheritance. He said nothing more. And there was no yelling, no curses, no public spectacle, only rejection, complete, cold, absolute rejection. He turned and left the room, leaving me standing there, stripped of everything that had once defined me. In that moment, I felt the emptiness of loss, the weight of being alone in a world that had once promised protection. But beneath that weight, a strange relief began to bloom. I realized I had nothing left to fear. No title, no status, no family could bind me to lies anymore. I walked away from that council chamber with nothing in my hands, yet I felt richer than I had ever been. My identity, my life, my soul belonged to truth now. I carried freedom in the quiet certainty of knowing that Jesus had not abandoned me, that his presence was stronger than any earthly bond, and though I walked away with empty streets, silent halls, light and the eyes of a family that could never accept me, I felt a joy that defied the pain, a hope that would guide every step I took beyond the palace gates. The journey ahead was uncertain, dangerous and lonely, but it was mine, and I would never return to living in chains again. I left the palace behind, its walls no longer home, its wealth no longer mine, its protection a memory I would never reclaim. The streets of Riyadh felt strange beneath my feet, unfamiliar yet alive, filled with people who could not see the truth that pulsed through my soul. I had no family, no title, no inheritance, but I carried something infinitely greater. Jesus was with me. I woke each day to a freedom I had never known, a peace that did not depend on anyone else's approval. The fear that had governed my every action since childhood had vanished. The emptiness that had haunted me for years was replaced by purpose. I read the Bible openly now, not in secret, not in trembling fear, but with hunger and reverence. His words became my guide, his promises my shield. I connected with believers online, Men and women who had faced rejection, persecution, and exile for the same truths I had embraced. They became my family, my refuge, my witnesses. Together we shared testimonies, prayed for each other, and reminded one another that faith is measured not by safety, but by courage to follow truth. I thought of Hassan, of every moment I had been silenced by fear, of every expectation that had chained me. I realized that my death had not been the end, it had been the beginning. The world had stripped me bare, but in stripping me, it revealed what was real. And my identity was no longer tied to bloodline, race, or status. My worth was measured in Him alone. I wept as I understood the depth of His love, a love that transcends tribe, nation, and even death. I had been shown that no human system could define my value, that no family or kingdom could dictate my soul. Everywhere I look, I see His fingerprints, in the kindness of strangers, in the courage that rises in my chest, in the clarity of truth I now live by. I no longer fear rejection, for I have been accepted by the one who matters most. I no longer seek approval, for I have been approved by His gaze. Every step I take carries the memory of the life I left, but also the promise of the life I have now. I walk humbly, but with strength, knowing that each decision to follow Him brings healing, freedom, and purpose. What I have learned that truth is not comfortable and obedience is not safe, but both bring life. I have learned that love is stronger than fear, and that the kingdom of God cannot be taken away, even when everything else is stripped from you. My mission is clear: to tell the world what I have seen, to share the testimony of a life transformed, to give voice to those who live in silence under fear. I carry the memory of my family, not with anger, but with a desire that they too might see the truth I have found. I do not know what the future holds. I do not know if I will be hunted, rejected, or misunderstood, but I do know this: I am alive in a way I have never been, and nothing can take that away. Jesus did not give me religion, He gave me life, identity, and hope. My death was not the end, it was awakening. And now, with every breath, with every word, every choice, I live to honor Him. My story is no longer about fear or status or the palace I left behind. It is about a life surrendered to truth, a soul restored by love, and a heart finally free. And if anyone hears this testimony, I pray they understand that what I have seen, what I have lived, what I have become, is possible for them too. No matter who you are, no matter what binds you, truth exists, and freedom comes from Him alone.